I've been exploring the Rocky Mountains in Colorado long enough to see the bitter cold and snow become lush green grass. The aspens turning from thin skeletons of winter to the fullness of summer, and now to the last warmth of fall. Now that the temperatures have begun dropping into the 20s again at night, I've decided I would rather move to warmer weather instead of fighting the cold. For me, that means heading west into southern Utah, and the goal as always is to get there with as many dirt roads and trails as possible. I came to Colorado in March of this year, and I've spent the last 7 months exploring the Rockies. It's incredible just how much has changed compared to when I first got here. I was set on a mission for starting another cleaning company, and now I have my eyes on an entirely different path. And that came through a lot of time in the mountains, reading, thinking about life, and considering what really mattered. You know, some real growing up stuff that every 20-something has gone through. But something about the Rocky Mountains just brings everything into perspective. It's peacefully powerful. This state has been my home for the last 7 months, and I've spent most of that time way out here in the wilderness. I've swam in its vast blue lakes and have been drinking from its crystal clear streams. I believe this state's water is its most beautiful resource. And quite frankly, I've never needed to worry about where I'd find drinking water here. It's everywhere. It's all around you. The towering mountains and high elevation have kept me at a cool 65 to 70 degrees, while the rest of the country complains of triple-digit temperatures. The people who live here have a passion for their land, and they respect it and protect it. And in return, the land attracts tourism, which keeps these old mining towns thriving. There's been a lot that's happened this year, and these mountains have changed my life. When I was invited to put my ambulance on display for the Colorado Tiny House Festival, that was a moment that I realized I was on the wrong path. I've been able to move on from things of the past. I've met new friends, established new connections, and even made this place my legal home, which is just a P.O. box. But part of being a nomad is knowing when to leave. What's up, guys? As you can probably tell by the surroundings, well, I am no longer in the Rocky Mountains. I'm on my way to Utah. It's going to be a 247-mile trip that is mainly trails and gravel roads, with only 60 miles being actual highway. Now, I did all of my planning for this trip about an hour before I got started, so I'm going to share with you guys exactly what's in store in the next 2 weeks of being completely off-grid. So let's go find a shady spot to talk. So this seems like a good, quiet little spot here. Hopefully it's not too echoey. I guess we'll find out. Sit down here. So after the whole breakdown in Gunnison, where I had to replace 2 alternators on the road, I headed to Crested Butte, Colorado. Now I met up with some new friends out there and did some dirt biking, and then I headed up above Crested Butte to some higher elevation. And for the first week I was there, it still felt like the end of summer. You know, the leaves were still green, it was still somewhat warm, but there was just a tiny bit of crispness to the air. Just started to get a little chilly outside. I started to see some massive changes signaling to me that it's going to get cold, winter is coming, it's time to get out of here. And let me just tell you, Crested Butte in the fall is just, it is something else. Let me show you. So now that it's time to leave Krusty Butte, I need to figure out where I'm going to go next. Now I've had a complete change in direction since I've been out here in the Rocky Mountains. And part of that change means that I need to go back to Southern California, where I have a horse barn full of tools and other stuff that I need to go ahead and collect and move somewhere. And by the way, I'm going to be using those tools for a really cool new project that's coming up. So if you want to see that, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. I don't have any particular timeline in terms of how fast I need to get there. So my destination right now is going to be just someplace I haven't gone before that gets me closer and closer to Southern California. And that stop will be Moab, Utah. Moab is like off-road central. There's a ton of dirt bikers and jeepers and all that type of stuff. So I figured that it'll be an awesome place to go out and explore the Red Rocks and see some stuff that I haven't seen before. And I also know there's a ton of other van lifers out there and stuff like that. So it'd be a good place to go. Now, what I like to do is more of an overlanding type of thing. And basically what overlanding is it's traveling to remote destinations, often on unpaved and somewhat difficult roads, while being fully self-reliant on your vehicle and your gear. And yeah, the general joke is that you can have someone out in their $100,000 expedition rig, and then you'll see a Corolla out on the trail. Both people are technically overlanding. And this particular trip is going to be 247 miles. Roughly 60 miles of that will be on paved road, and the rest of it is going to be on gravel roads and dirt trail. Some of it's going to be difficult to the point where I might even need to turn around, but other parts of it are going to be extremely easy. So here's my steps for preparing a trip like this. Now, I built up my ambulance to go completely off-grid for roughly 2 weeks at a time. I have solar for power, then that has never been an issue. I have 46 gallons of fresh water. I have plenty of fuel on board. I have a heater. I have a wood stove. I have plenty of food storage and a fridge and freezer. So as far as actually prepping the vehicle goes, the vehicle is almost always prepped. So my first big step is opening up onX Off-Road. Now, onX Off-Road is a mapping system on your phone and on your computer. Pretty much a mapping system that is just way more capable than your standard map would be. It's going to show you all of the dirt roads, trails, what's national forest land, what's BLM land, what's state trust land, what's private land. It's going to give you a ton of information. onX Off-Road is the main app that I use to explore. And it won't just show you all the off-road stuff, it'll also show you highways and stuff like that. And what you do is you go ahead and lay a series of waypoints. Your first waypoint is just where you're starting out, and your last one is your destination. Then you go ahead and you start researching all of the trails in that area and you start connecting them. Now, here's a major point that I need to go ahead and say here. There's two types of trails on onX Off-Road. The first one is blue and the second one is green. Blue trails have a ton of information, including trail ratings and pictures. And then the green ones are completely up in the air. You really don't know what you're getting into. Now, my ambulance might look really cool and off-road capable, and it generally is. I've been able to get through a lot of stuff. It is still an ambulance. It is 8 feet wide. It's like 22 feet long, and it's like 10 feet tall. So that thing is going to scrape up against bushes.
Woo! Mirror got turned in on that one.
I sometimes have to cut down limbs to be able to get by. And worst of all in this truck is that it has a terrible departure angle. So if I come into a situation where I have to start going down a hill and then right back up, that back end is going to hit. And when I first bought the ambulance, I actually got myself stuck doing something like that.
I forgot I got stuck on a wasp nest, and that's what's chasing my old friend. I actually really enjoy this video now.
Ow, fuck. So I learned my lesson. So now it's a really big point of mine to really research my trails before setting my route. Now, the blue trails actually have ratings on them, and I've taken the ambulance on stuff that's up to a 4 out of 10 on onX, and I feel comfortable with like a 3 out of 10. The series of trails that I've researched for this route are 2s and 3s. So I can be pretty sure that I'll be able to get through them without an issue. But if there is any point that I get hung up with the departure angle, well, it means I'm gonna have to turn around. And besides just looking at a trail rating, there's a couple of other things that I do. In these series of trails, I went ahead and I switched on the topographical maps, and that allows me to see elevation gain and decline super easily. And I saw there's some points in here where it looks like it might get a little steep. I also zoomed in on the satellite map and started to see there's some narrow shelf roads here. I'm gonna be getting myself into some situations where the trail is only 1 vehicle wide, and there's not a lot of turnout points. And this is one of my least favorite types of trails to do because I'm in an 8-foot wide ambulance. I'm super wide and it's a narrow shelf road. And one of the other things I do to research trails is actually just looking it up on YouTube. If it's a popular trail, sometimes people will upload their own videos of the trail, and I'll be able to get a POV view of what this trail actually looks like.
And sure enough, there are a few videos.
And when I looked at it, everything looked really doable. But there were some sections where I might be a little worried about tire punctures, and there's also a very, very narrow section where I'm gonna have brush rubbing up against the truck. So really the main two dangers that I see coming up on this trail is gonna be, well, a lot of brush coming along the side, and then really narrow shelf roads where I might not have an opportunity to back up or turn around. But I do have a couple ways to combat this. I can go ahead and throw the drone up in the air and see if there's any oncoming traffic. And then I also painted my truck with bed liner. So unless there's like an 8-inch thick tree branch hanging out, I think I'll be fine. So after researching all the trail systems that'll take me to my destination, that's when things get a little bit more interesting. This is when I start adding waypoints for things like refuels and resupplies. If I see any lakes or rivers on the maps that I might be able to fill up on water with, I add a waypoint. And if I see any dispersed camping sites on the map, I go ahead and add those as potential campsites. I also use an app called iOverlander to be able to find camping spots. Now in this case, I didn't even look at iOverlander, but just for the sake of this video, I went ahead and opened up iOverlander, and it turns out there's like 2, maybe 3 spots along this route. But I know there's way more than just those 2 free dispersed camping sites along this route, because I went ahead and looked at satellite imagery and at Onyx Off-Road to know that dispersed camping is allowed, and there are several spots along the way. And I think this just goes to show you that you shouldn't rely on one app to find spots. If you're just looking at iOverlander like I used to when I got started, then you're gonna miss out on so many cool spots that aren't on the map. And they're gonna be way more low-key, because it seems like everyone and their mom knows about iOverlander spots. And a quick note with the campsites. Onyx allows you to see if it's national forest land, state park, BLM, any of that type of stuff. And although national forest and BLM land generally have the same camping regulations in most places, it's still good to go ahead and look online and see if there's any additional regulations you need to know about. In my case, it's okay to do dispersed camping in most of the area, but some of the BLM land is only in designated sites. So in the case of this trip, I added 2 refuel and resupply stops as well as 1 water fill-up. Crested Butte currently doesn't have a grocery store open. They're actually remodeling it. So I'm going to leave Crested Butte while only being able to fill up on water. So my first supply run is going to be in Delta, Colorado, which is right before we actually get into the heart of this adventure. There, my plan is to fill up on fuel, groceries, do a Walmart run, and maybe top off on water if I need it. Then the next 70 miles is going to be completely out there. Then I have the small town of Nampa, something like that. It's something weird. There I'm going to be able to fill up on fuel, water, and a few groceries too before I continue on to Moab, Utah. And this second section of trail is where things look like they're actually going to be really difficult. So those are my 2 resupply and refuel stops. Then I'm going to go ahead and take all of those waypoints I created, and I'm going to use Onyx's route building tool where I go ahead and snap each of those waypoints together, and it actually snaps all the trails together at the same time. And at the end of it, it's going to give you a full-blown route. This is going to give you your total mileage, it's going to give you your elevation gain and decline, and then you're able to download the maps so you have offline access to them. And just to be clear, I'm not sponsored by Onyx Off-Road or anything like that. Onyx, if you're listening, I'd love to be sponsored, but this is just an app that I really enjoy using, and it helps me do more of what I love, which is just exploring this awesome country. And to be honest with you, that's really all that I do for my planning. I determine where I want to go, I determine my route, and then I go through my checklist to make sure I have everything on board that I need to have on board. And that's not super difficult to do because I live in my rig full time. It's not like I'm in a house where I need to go inside and grab everything and pack up. I'm always ready to go. And I have a ton of extra survival gear and food and stuff like that in the rig, so I'm not too worried about any of it. Utah is an extremely remote area. I'm sure that there's gonna be no cell phone service out there, and I'm not even worried about it because I know I can power up Starlink, and if something happens, I break down, any of that, I'm gonna be able to get in touch with someone and it won't be an issue. I know that it might not seem like a lot for a 2-week excursion through the mountains being completely off grid, but like I said, I do this all the time. Most of the time it's just on a whim, kind of whenever I feel like it, I pack up and I move, and that's part of being a nomad, and that's what I really enjoy about this lifestyle. So now it's time to get moving towards warmer weather. And in the next episode, we leave Crested Butte and travel through the 60-mile-long gravel road called Kevlar Pass, and fill up on supplies in Delta, and finally embark on the real adventure. Make sure you don't miss it by subscribing to the channel and clicking the bell icon so you get notified. And if you want to support the channel, check out my Patreon page. I do a monthly 30-minute call with my Patreon members where we can talk about rigs, adventure, and whatever else you want. See you soon, guys.